And I said, this guy doesn't have what it takes. And you're seeing that now because the worst decisions I've ever seen. That's, again, why I put the patent. I just remembered it as I was coming over here. I said, get that clip quickly. The people of Alabama understand that clip. Do you think that... Let me ask you, do you think that General Patton was woke? I don't think so. What do you think, Mike? Mike, was he woke? I don't think so. I don't think he was too woke. He was the exact opposite. You know what woke means? It means you're a loser. Everything woke. Everything woke. It's true. Everything woke turns to okay? It's true. It's true. Look at what's happening.
Donald Trump critiques woke culture, highlighting concerns over its impact.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing them.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist
I'm
is
denying that
dangerous.
trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you are denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
Senator Josh Hawley questions a professor's views on gender identity and its implications for violence towards trans people.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women...
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
What I can say here is that the NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition happened,
I'm going to try again.
The rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? It's a yes-no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech. Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're not answering that. Let me
gender.
ask you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is different than gender.
Why
and I do believe that women's sports have a great value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right now.
Ms. Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But why have a separate category for women? If there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last decade.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100 meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18 In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100-meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men.
Ted Cruz challenges the president of the HRC on the differences between men and women, sparking a debate.
Next question comes from Bess Mosley.
Hello, Governor.
Hi.
Welcome to New Hampshire. You frequently use the term woke, and you recently said that the word means different things to different people. What does it mean to you?
Woke is a form of cultural Marxism. It's about taking individuality, merit, and achievement and subordinating that to a political agenda based on identity politics. It is effectively displacing the truth in favor of ideology. And I think it's important that we fight against that because our society does need to be rooted in truth. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to believe that. That is not true, and we can't govern our society based on things that are not true. Second, when that ideology takes hold of institutions, it corrodes the institutions and it produces bad results. For example, when you have woke overtake parts of the economy with things like ESG, they attack energy, they attack other things. The average person ends up poorer as a result of that. When woke overtakes education, you get indoctrination and students end up performing worse as a result of that. When you have ideological prosecutors get into office in cities like San Francisco, they stop prosecuting criminals. The inmates run the asylum. The average person ends up less safe as a result of that. Every jurisdiction in this country that has indulged in this type of leftism, city or state, has failed. How do I know that? Because people that are fleeing are coming to my state in Florida and they're telling me the story about it. So this is not just an academic debate. It's, do we want policy based on tried and true principles, enduring principles that have made our country great? Or are we going to go on some ideological joyride, let people out of prison, do this, do that, and see our quality of life be destroyed? Woke needs to die.
Ron DeSantis explains his perspective on woke and left ideologies in a straightforward manner.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers, which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, they will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding.
Trump discusses plans to address what he sees as left-wing gender ideologies affecting children.
Thank you for yielding, Chairwoman Fox, and thank you to my Republican colleagues for taking up this very important bill. There has been a push by powerful teacher unions, left-wing politicians, and most concerning, the Biden Justice Department to silence parents throughout our country. The Biden administration used the FBI, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world, to intimidate parents for showing up to school board meetings to oppose Biden's radical agenda. Parents' rights are non-negotiable. Parents are the decision makers for their child's education, which includes their child's curriculum. Parents want schools focused on reading, writing, and math, not woke politics. The radical left in our country seeks to silence parents and use public schools and colleges to indoctrinate our youth. They don't want to teach children how to think, they want to teach them what to think. I am grateful that several of my bills are included in the Parents' Bill of Rights to protect children from radical gender ideology and to ensure parents are informed when information is being collected about their children through surveys or documents. Parents have the right to know what is being taught to their child, and they have the right to opt their child out of any discussion about sexual orientation and gender ideology. I am proud House Republicans are keeping.
Rep. Mary Miller discusses parental rights in education and the influence of leftist agendas.
One of the major issues, and it's a holdover from sort of colonial Victorian, is the issue of sexual preference in many African countries. In Kenya, to be gay, the LGBT community is illegal. They just want to have equal rights, the same privacy and equality as all other Kenyans do. Is that something that you aspire to for your country?
I want to be very clear, Christiana. I will not engage in a subject that is of no, it is not of any major importance to the people and the Republic of Kenya. This is not an issue, as you would want to put it, of human rights or this. This is an issue of society, of our own base as a culture, as a people, regardless of which community you come from. This is not acceptable. This is not agreeable. This is not about Uhuru Kenyatta saying yes or no. This is an issue that the people of Kenya themselves, who have bestowed upon themselves a constitution, right, after several years, have clearly stated that this is not a subject that they are willing to engage in, yeah, at this time and moment. In years to come, possibly long after I'm president, who knows? Maybe our society will have reached a stage where those are issues that people are willing, freely and open to discuss. I have to be honest with you. And that is the position that we have always maintained. Those are the laws that we have, and those are laws that are 100% supported by 99% of the Kenyan people, irregardless of where they come.
Kenya's president addresses a CNN anchor's questions about LGBTQ rights, stating its lack of relevance in Kenya.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
What
well, just talking me through how by not answering the question, by repeating processes which are not related to the question that I've asked.
What's mansplaining, Senator?
Well, it's the slightly patronising and condescending way that you're responding to my questions.
Well, I would suggest, Senator, that if you're putting the word man in front of some description of what I'm doing, you're doing that which I'm sure you're very much against, is making a implication about how I'm conducting my role as a man.
Well, then the easiest way to do it...
Is that what you're saying, Senator?
Well, what I'm saying is that the way you've been responding to me has been patronising and condescending, and I have responded to that. So the easiest way to deal with this is not to have that way in responding to the questions I've asked.
Imagine the reaction, Senator, if I said you were woman-splaining. You're saying that I'm mansplaining.
Well, it is a term that's used.
Is it by whom?
Well, it is a term that's used.
By rude,
doesn't make
by rude senators. By senators who are seeking to make gender an issue.
No, I'm not.
Do you want to reconsider what you said, Senator?
No, I don't.
You don't want it?
No.
You don't want it?
No.
I mean, I just find it extraordinary, Senator. I just find it extraordinary that you or any senator at this table would seek to invoke gender in impugning how a senator is responding.
Well, I'm surprised
mansplaining.
you haven't.
Let the
you
record
don't
show.
understand
Let the record
the term
show,
mansplaining.
Chair, that Senator Gallagher thinks it's appropriate to refer to a senator as mansplaining. Take a good look at yourself. I mean, sitting here and saying to a male senator, you're mansplaining. If I said to a female senator, you are womansplaining, there would be uproar. Stop being a hypocrite. Conduct yourself appropriately for this place.
I'm sorry you're so offended by the use of the word. It is a word that's used. I'm surprised that you're so shocked by the use of the word.
No, I'm just calling hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Thy name is Labor. Thy name is Senator Gallagher.
Well, I think you need to settle down, actually.
Senator, welcome to federal parliament.
Oh, right.
Welcome to
Minister order. Where the big people
Minister
play.
order.
A heated exchange in the Australian Senate over accusations of mansplaining reflects broader gender discourse.
Well, Judge Netburn, I'm going to continue on this line of questioning. In your court, what matters more, the rights of individuals or your political ideology?
I apply the law to the facts.
I asked a question, which matters more?
Well, my political ideology doesn't matter at all.
Okay, so I don't believe you. And I think this case demonstrates that you are willing to subjugate the rights of individuals to satisfy your political ideology. This case involves a male defendant who a 9-year-old boy. Was he guilty of that?
Yes, the petitioner pled guilty to that.
Okay, so he a 9-year-old boy. He also a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
He pled guilty. The petitioner pled guilty to that crime as well.
So was he guilty?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
And also criminal deviant conduct, which the record doesn't disclose what that was exactly. Then, after serving in prison, Mr. McLean was released for parole, but then violated the terms of parole by having internet and was sent back to prison. 1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
I'm unclear on exactly the time frame that you're at, but the petitioner was convicted of distributing child pornography.
Child pornography that was images of adults violently children.
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay.
For which there are real victims.
And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago you said that when this man decided that he was a she, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
I think what I said, or at least what
that is a verbatim quote, entirely a female.
Sorry, what I meant to say was hormonally a female.
Okay, but that's not entirely. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2", serial child with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Ted Cruz critiques a decision by a judge to place a trans woman in a women's prison.
LGBTQIA, there's so many letters, they've just added a plus at the end. That's where we are now. What's going on? So the same movement, because if we're going to call that one thing, let's play it fair. The same movement that said that the sex of the person you're attracted to is hardwired on the day you're born. That was the premise of the gay rights movement, for it to count as a civil right. That movement is now saying that your own biological sex is totally fluid over the course of your life.
Hypocrites.
You can't believe both those things. Well, I think I'm going to get to a deeper say. That's where I was about a year or two ago, but I think there's something deeper going on, and I'll tell you what it is. So the same movement, and by the way, let's think about the women's rights movement in this country, which said there's many ways to be a woman. You can have long hair, short hair, you can wear a skirt, you can wear jeans. Now says that, oh, if actually you want to behave a certain way, that means you're a man. So I think that the hypocrisies go all the way down, and I'll tell you what's going on. You can't believe both of those things at the same time if you're operating according to principles of sheer logic. But you can if you're adopting a faith. a cult-like belief system. So, this is controversial for me to say, but I'm going to tell you what I think. I believe that transgenderism specifically is a mental health disorder. I believe it's a mental health condition.
Okay.
No. We're going to finish this. This is good. We have to have open conversation in this country. But I don't think the compassionate thing to do.
Health disorder.
Well,
it's how they feel.
Well, let me. If I'm going to give you a chance to respond if you'd like, but we can't have an open debate in this country if we're not able to state our views.
That's how they feel.
That's how they feel. And you know what? I'll tell you a story, and you deserve to hear this. I met 2 young women in this race about 6 months ago. Their names were Chloe and Katie, 2 young women. They're in their 20s now. Both of them had their breasts cut off. One of them had her uterus removed.
Okay.
They're in their 20s. They regret that decision. One of them wants to have kids. She'll never have kids. The other one will never breastfeed her children.
Vivek Ramaswamy discusses transgender topics, triggering a debate with a pro-trans individual.
In the West, they got a movement called wokeness, where you are super sensitive about other people's issues, and you become hypersensitive when other people somehow or others say things or mention things or refer to you without the respect which you or your super subgroup feel you are entitled to. It leads to very extreme attitudes and social norms, particularly in some academic institutions, universities. You talk about safe spaces, you talk about appropriate pronouns, you talk about how I'm about to say something which may be offensive to you. If you don't want to hear it, perhaps you'd like to leave now. And life becomes very burdensome. And I don't think we want to go in that direction. It does not make us a more resilient, cohesive society with a strong sense of solidarity. We must be more robust.
Singapore's Prime Minister offers his perspective on the woke movement, sparking discussion.
So you think it's fine to say to religious people that they are prohibited from gathering outside, wearing a mask, socially distanced? They can't do it. But if you want to come and protest, defund the police, if you want to support that, that's fine. You can gather en masse, person to person, close up, thousands of people. That's okay. That discrimination's okay. That's your position?
Senator, that is not my position.
It was your position. It's what you argued.
I did not write these orders. What I said.
You defended it in court. And you just articulated to me what I take to be your position. Why were the restrictions that you defended struck down as discriminatory? Why were they? You know the facts. You're a good lawyer. Why'd you lose?
Senator.
Oh, come on, Judge. Don't make me do this. Do you want me to go through it for you? You lost because Mayor Bowser was going to mass protests herself personally with thousands of people. At the same time she was doing that, she was prohibiting churches, religious people, from gathering socially distanced outside wearing masks.
John Hawley addresses discrepancies in policies on religious gatherings versus protests.
Can I ask you what you identify as?
Identify?
Ethnicity?
I identify as an American.
Not an African American?
I didn't get elected into my position because of the color of my skin or do any race baiting stuff that it seems like you're promoting here.
A black man responds to a race-baiting politician, sharing a different viewpoint.
15-year-old daughter was in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month. And that man, Scott Smith, because he went to a school board and tried to defend his daughter's rights, was condemned internationally. Do you apologize to Scott Smith and his 15-year-old daughter, Judge?
Senator, anyone whose child was is the most horrific crime I can imagine, and is certainly entitled and protected by the First Amendment to protest to their school board about that.
But he was cited by the School Board Association as a domestic terrorist, which we now know that letter and those reports were the basis for your.
Senator,
this is
that's wrong.
Shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony, your directive, Your performance is shameful.
That's not
Thank God you are not on the Supreme Court. You should resign and disgrace judge.
A senator critiques a judge's decision involving a case with a trans individual.
You're a medical doctor. What's a woman?
I think it's important that we educate people like you about why we're doing the things that we do.
Okay. Are you going to answer my question? Can you answer the question, what's a woman?
I'm a woman, and I will ask you, which pronouns do you use?
So you give me an example of a woman, you say that you are a woman. Can you tell me, otherwise, can you tell me what a woman is?
Yes, I'm telling you, I'm a woman.
Stop it. Get some help. Is that as comprehensive a definition as you can give me?
That's as comprehensive as the definitions as I will give you today.
Arambide, is that a pretty close approximation of the pronunciation?
Arambide?
Arambide. What do you say a woman is?
I believe that everyone can identify for themselves.
Do you believe then that men can become pregnant and have abortions?
Yes.
What the fuck? A discussion on defining woman leads to controversial views on pregnancy and gender.
As I talk to the people in my district, as I talk to the people in the community, and as I've done some research, in fact, Heritage Foundation did a study, and nearly 70% of the active duty service members have witnessed really a politicization of the military. And whether we think it's a problem, we feel that it's the study and the data that Heritage did, and I can give that to you, shows that the military being political is just, it's not positive. And it hurts. It hurts morale, it hurts pride. And I talk to men and women and families and in my district, and they feel that they lost a sense of pride. They feel like the woke agenda isn't helping. We talk too much about diversity, equity, and inclusion when I'm all for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I think the most diverse and equity and inclusive that we can be is for the individual. And from what I've heard and what I've seen is we've gone from the individual to a small percentage of folks that we focus on. And I have in front of me, the slides on the diversity training and the equity and the inclusion training. How much money and time do we really spend on that? Can we get a better sense to help educate everyone?
I can provide you, exact information for the record, but I will tell you, most of our training, and most of our focus is on the readiness of the force. And part of that readiness of the force is to ensure that we're building cohesive teams, and part of those cohesive teams is to get to know our airmen to left and our right.
And I appreciate that. And one of the things it talks about in one of your slides is not to recognize people as moms and dads. I mean, as a mother, I take a little bit of offense to that. It also talks about not using the word terrorist. Can you explain why we wouldn't use the word terrorist and mom and dad? I think you got to get that message out, because I think a lot of people are really frustrated and they feel like we're polarizing as opposed to coming together.
Lisa McLean questions a general about diversity, equity, and inclusion training in the military.
I'm going to define it in neutral terms that nobody can deny, okay? Being woke refers to waking up to invisible alleged societal injustices based on genetically inherited attributes: race, sex, and sexual orientation. And further, it creates a hierarchy based on these genetic attributes to say that you're either an oppressor or you're a member of an oppressed class, which creates these invisible relationships that creates a social hierarchy. And what they say is we need to turn that social hierarchy upside down, or at least even it out, by using any means necessary, not just through government, but even through the private sector, even through our schools, and even through our economy itself, including the use of quota systems based on race, gender, and sexual orientation to correct for those alleged societal injustices. That is what it means to be woke. That is what the woke movement is all about. Whether you're on the left or the right or the center, you look at what proponents of this movement have said over the last 10 to 15 years, that's exactly it. So now we've defined woke. We've done it. Jen Psaki, MSNBC, you claim it can't be done. You purposefully cut out my repeated definitions of it. I wrote an entire book about this 2 years ago. You conveniently only quote the Republicans who actually are just a bunch of talking mouthpieces as opposed to conservatives who actually understand what they're saying. That's convenient for you. Great. Now we've defined it. Now let's have a debate about it. Okay, what's wrong with this woke movement? There's a lot that's wrong with it, but first and most importantly, it creates division in our country. It tells you that if you're an individual, you're just on the tectonic plate of group identity, that you have no agency over your life, whether or not you're a member of an oppressed class or an oppressor group. That's what determines what you can achieve in life and increasingly what you're even allowed to think. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley summed it up when she said, we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice, that we don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. What does that say? It equates the color of your skin, your race, with the content of ideas that you're allowed to have. That is wrong. It is anti-American, and it is fracturing our country to a breaking point.
Vivek Ramaswamy explains his views on the implications of woke culture for the country.
You support Hamas, do you not?
Senator, oddly enough, I'm going to say thank you for that question because it demonstrates the purpose of our hearing today in a very effective way.
Let's start first with a yes or no.
Hamas is a foreign terrorist organization that I do not support, but you asking the executive director of the Arab American Institute that question very much puts the focus on the issue of hate in our country.
Well, I got your answer, and I appreciate it. What is the... You support Hezbollah, too, don't you?
Again, I find this line of questioning extraordinarily disappointing,
Is that
Senator.
No?
That you have Arab American constituents that you represent in your great state.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that, but my time's limited, and I apologize, but is that a yes or a no?
A yes or no question to do I support Hezbollah? The answer is I don't support violence, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, or any other entity that invokes it.
You can't bring yourself to say no, can you?
No, I can say no. I can say yes.
But
what I can say is your line of questioning.
Do you support or oppose Iran and their hatred of Jews?
Again, I'm going to emphasize Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, none of them is going to this discussion.
You can't bring yourself to say no,
sir.
you?
I don't support.
It's real simple.
Excuse me. I'm going to, if I may, as a Muslim woman, sir, I'm going to tell you I do not support Iran. But what I will tell you is that this conversation.
I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. You called our decision to cut funding. You called our decision to cut fund. Well, first, what's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency?
It's UNRWA, which is the institution that exists to provide services and aid to the nearly 6 million Palestinian refugees.
And you called our decision to cut funding for them, quote, an incredible moral failure, close quote.
That is absolutely correct. But again, I would suggest that conversation is about foreign policy.
We did that because 9 UNRWA staff members were fired for actually helping Hamas on October 7th. Isn't that the case?
I don't believe that that's correct in terms of...
Let me ask you one more time. You support Hamas, don't you? You support UNRWA and Hamas, don't you?
Sir.
Please. Senator Kennedy questions a nominee's stance on Palestine and Hamas.
Should biological men be able to expose themselves to unwilling women, including underage girls?
Senator, that's not a view I share.
So your answer is no?
Senator, I want to be somewhat careful because there are a number of cases that are working.
Is your answer yes? You said that's not a view you share.
It's not.
Then why, just a moment ago, Senator Blackburn was asking you about, as a congressman, you were a congressman from 2019 to 2021.
That's correct.
You were original co-sponsor of and you voted for an Orwellian-named extreme piece of Democrat legislation called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that biological men could play in women's sports, could go to women's bathrooms, could go to women's locker room. The women were not asked. The women were not asked if biological men could go into their locker rooms and disrobe with them. You sponsored it and voted for it. You just said a minute ago you didn't agree with men exposing themselves to unwilling women. If you didn't agree with that, why did you sponsor and vote for legislation that would mandate that women be victimized like that?
Senator, it's been a number of years since I sponsored that legislation, and I do understand that
it's been 4 years.
There is
it's been 4 years.
I understand, Senator. For the last 2 years, I have been serving.
I'm not asking about the last 2 years. You were a member of Congress. You sponsored it and voted for it. Why did you believe women and girls don't have a right to be free from harassment, to be free from biological men disrobing in front of them without the women or girls having any right to say anything about it or to protest anything about it? Why did you vote for that?
Senator, my recollection of the legislation is that it would prevent discrimination based on gender.
Your recollection is contrary to the explicit text of the statute. Are you fond of ignoring the text of statutes?
Senator, as a sitting judge now, and if I'm fortunate to be confirmed as a district court judge, I will follow statutory.
But you didn't when you were a congressman.
Ted Cruz discusses concerns over a Biden nominee's views on gender-specific spaces.
Can you define for this committee what is a man?
You're looking at one.
Great. So you are a man. I like that. Can you tell me, can men get pregnant?
Unless you know something I don't, I think the answer is pretty obvious.
What is that answer, sir?
I'm asking you, is there something you know that I don't know that would say that a man...
Well, I'm asking what you know. Can men get pregnant?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Secretary, materials coming from your department, you've referred to mothers as birthing persons, replacing that title with...
Are mothers not persons?
Mothers are persons, but it seems to be more inclusive, like you're trying to include another gender in that.
I'm all about inclusion, Congresswoman.
There you go. Well, just as a mother of 4 boys, I'm not necessarily offended at that. I am a person, but it's just unscientific and absurd.
How so?
To include men in that, if you're going to be inclusive, if you're going to be inclusive in birthing persons, yes.
Well, but it seems to me that you're trying to define the term.
Reclaiming my time. Can men get pregnant? So then we don't need to include them in this. Mothers are mothers. Moving forward, Mr. Secretary, I want to read for you from a document from your office, the Office of Population Affairs. It says in here, and I quote, "Gender-affirming care encompasses many facets of healthcare needs and support. It has been shown to increase positive outcomes for transgender and non-binary children." Mr. Secretary, what is a transgender child?
A child in America is a child in America, and I hope you and I can love that child just as much as we
Can you
love our
define
own
what a transgender child is?
That's a child in America, and it's an American citizen child.
Lauren Boebert critiques Sec Xavier Becerra's use of birthing person instead of mother.
But I don't think that you're a friend to woman.
I knew I shouldn't have picked her. I knew I shouldn't have picked her. All right, so let me give you that answer right now. I respect women incredibly. I have had women working for me in positions that they've never worked in terms of construction, in terms of so many different jobs. I had a woman who was in charge of the building of Trump Tower many years ago, before it was even thought, before anybody would have even thought of it, and did a fantastic job. I have given women more opportunity than I would say virtually anybody in the construction industry. I have a daughter named Ivanka and a wife named Melania who constantly want me to talk about women's health issues because they know how I feel about it, and they know how I feel about women. I respect women. I love women. I cherish women. You know, Hillary Clinton said he shouldn't cherish. Well, I said, I do cherish. I cherish women. My mother was one of the great people of the world, maybe the greatest ever, my mother. I respect women, and I'm going to take care of women. You know, Jeb Bush didn't want to fund women's health issues. You read that. You saw that. And then he took it back later. I will take care of women, and I have great respect for women, and I do cherish women.
Trump responds to a feminist's critique with his views on his impact on women's issues.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I want to address something Tom just said, which is, in fact, that woke is supposed to advance equity in Europe. So here's the definition of equity, and see if it sounds like a definition of anything else you've ever heard of. The definition of equity comes from the public administration literature. It was written by a man named George Frederickson. And the definition is an administered political economy in which shares are adjusted so that citizens are made equal. Does that sound like anything you've heard of before? like socialism. They're going to administer an economy to make shares equal. The only difference between equity and socialism is the type of property that they redistribute, the type of shares. They're going to redistribute social and cultural capital in addition to economic and material capital. And so this is my thesis when we say, what is woke? Woke is Maoism with American characteristics, if I might borrow from Mao himself, who said that his philosophy was Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics, which means woke is Marxism. And it's a very provocative statement. It's something you will certainly hear it is not, that it is different. And the professors and the philosophers will spend a large amount of time explaining to you why. No, it's about economics when it's Marxism. This is social, this is cultural, this is different. It's not different. I need you to think biologically for one moment, and I don't mean about your bodies. We could do that. That's a different topic. I want you to think how we organize plants and animals when we study them. They're species, but above species, there are the genus of the animals. So you think like the cats, all the cats, but you have tigers, you have lions, you have house cats, you have whatever, leopards, many different kinds of cats. If we think of Marxism as a genus of ideological thought, then classical economic Marxism is a species. Radical feminism is a species in this same genus. Critical race theory is a species in this genus. Queer theory is a species in this genus. Post-colonial theory that's plaguing Europe is a species in this genus. And they have something that binds them together called intersectionality that makes them treated as if they are all one thing. But the logic is Marxist. And I want to convince you of that. Because Marx had a very simple proposition, but we get lost. We think that Marx was talking about economics because he often talked about economics. He wrote a book called Capital. It's a very famous book. And we think, well, this is about economic theory.
James Lindsay explains the connections between wokeness and Marxism in the European Parliament.
He's woke, and so Canadians are broke, Mr. Speaker. And I'll tell you what woke means in practice. I'll tell you what woke means in practice. His government approved dumping millions of liters of raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River. That's what woke means. Woke means charging a single mom higher costs to drive to work and feed her kids while the Prime Minister jets around using Canadian tax dollars pumping emissions into our atmosphere. That is the woke hypocrisy across the way. And if he's got the guts to tell the truth, will he tell us how much will carbon tax 2 cost Canadians?
Pierre Poilievre critiques policies of Justin Trudeau, highlighting concerns over woke policies.
If we spend $50 trillion to become carbon neutral in the United States of America by 2050, give me your estimate of how much that is going to reduce world temperatures.
So first of all, it's a net cost. It's what benefits we're having from getting our act together and reducing all of those climate benefits. We're seeing.
Let me ask again. Maybe I'm not being clear. If we spent $50 trillion to become carbon neutral by 2050 in the United States of America, how much is that going to reduce world temperature?
So we need to reduce our emissions, and we need to do everything we can.
You don't know, do you?
You can do the math. We need to.
You don't know, do you, Mr. Secretary?
So we're 13% of
If you know, why won't you tell me?
If we went to zero, that would be 13%.
You don't know, do you? You just want us to spend $50 trillion, and you don't have the slightest idea whether it's going to reduce world temperature. And this isn't your money, my money, it's taxpayer money. And you can't tell me how much it's going to lower world temperatures?
Senator Kennedy questions the Energy Department Secretary about the effectiveness of emissions policies.
Are you serious?
I'm asking you a
No,
question.
I mean, are you serious? Come on. You're telling me, no, excuse me, let me answer your question. Are you honestly saying that it's society's fault if a repeat violent offender commits 60 or 70 offenses? I think that criminal is to blame for his own actions. He is personally responsible. We're not talking about some kid who made one mistake when he was 19. We're talking about people who do 60, 70 violent offenses. And then they're because they're criminals.
So why are they criminals?
Because they do crime.
And why do they do crime?
Because we let them out early on bail.
So because they
I think we've solved the riddle here.
Because they got let out early on bail.
That's right.
They then commit the crime.
That's right. That's what all the experts agree is the cause of the crime.
So if they stayed in jail the whole time on bail in jail, they would then not commit crimes.
Because they'd be in jail, so they couldn't commit crimes.
When they
Pierre Poilievre challenges a journalist on the implications of woke ideologies.
Want to catch wokey moments in 4K? Watch till the end, subscribe, like the video, and comment wokies for a chance to win a brand new iPhone 16 or a cash prize. Also, don't forget to check out the next video on the end screen for more chances to win.